From translation, TLB, the Living Bible, this 258 day of the year. Today we are reading passages Daniel 1 through 3. Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 to 21. In the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to besiege Jerusalem. The Lord handed King Jehoiakim of Judah over to him, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. The king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men from Israel's royal and noble families. They had to be handsome and well-gifted, intelligent and well-educated, and suited for service in the palace. The king assigned them a daily allowance of food and wine from his own kitchens. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, 4 young men from Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Hananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. But Daniel made up his mind not to eat the king's food or drink his wine, so he asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat the unclean food. Now God had given the chief of staff special sympathy toward Daniel. He was afraid that if Daniel and his friends ate only vegetables, they might become weak and pale compared to the other young men their age. So he told Daniel, "I am afraid that if you eat only vegetables, you will look worse than the others." "Please test us for 10 days, Daniel said. "Give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. At the end of 10 days, compare us with the others and see how we look. Then make your decision about what to do with us." The chief of staff agreed to Daniel's suggestion. At the end of 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the others. From then on, the chief of staff allowed them to eat vegetables instead of the king's food. God gave these 4 young men supernatural ability to understand and learn. At the end of the 3-year training period, the chief of staff brought all the young men to King Nebuchadnezzar. The king questioned them and found that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were superior to all the others. No matter what question the king asked, these 4 young men could answer correctly. Daniel remained in the king's court until the 1st year of the reign of King Cyrus. Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 to 49. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream, and when he woke up, he was troubled. He called together all his magic men, astrologers and sorcerers, and told them to interpret his dream. They came to the king and said, "Long life to you, your majesty." The king replied, "I had a dream that has caused me to worry. I want to know what it means." The astrologers replied to the king, "Long life to you, your majesty. Tell us the dream, and we will interpret it for you." But the king said, "No, I have changed my mind. If you can't tell me what the dream was as well as what it means, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be destroyed. If you can tell me what the dream was and what it means, you shall be given me rich gifts and great honor." The astrologers begged the king, "Tell us the dream, and we will interpret it for you." The king replied, "I know what you are trying to do. You are stalling for time. If you can't tell me what the dream was, there is not a court official in all the empire who can interpret it." The king's edict was issued that all the wise men of Babylon were to be destroyed. The astrologers were destroyed, and a search was made for Daniel and his friends to be killed. Then Daniel and his friends asked Arioch, captain of the king's guard, why the king had issued such a harsh decree. Arioch explained that a horrible dream had troubled the king, and that he had demanded to know its meaning. Daniel approached the king and asked for time to interpret the dream. Daniel returned to his house and told his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah about the king's edict. And Daniel prayed that God in heaven would give him wisdom to understand the king's dream. That night, God revealed the dream and its meaning to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised God in heaven. He said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for he alone has wisdom and power. He controls the course of world events. He removes kings and sets up other kings. He reveals deep and mysterious things and knows what is to happen in the future. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors, for you have given me wisdom and power. Now I will come to you and tell you the dream and its meaning." Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king. The king asked Daniel, "Are you able to tell me what my dream was and what it means?" Daniel replied, "There are no wise men, astrologers, magicians, or fortune-tellers who can interpret the king's dream. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has told me what you asked. Your Majesty, while you were sleeping, you had a dream that disturbed you. The mystery of your dream was revealed to me, not because I am cleverer than anyone else, but because God wants you to know what it means. Your dream was about a huge statue of a man, enormous and terrifying. The head of the statue was made of gold. The chest and arms were made of silver. The belly and thighs were made of bronze. The legs were made of iron, and the feet were a mixture of iron and clay. As you watched, a stone was cut from a mountain, but not by human hands. It struck the feet of iron and clay, smashing them to bits. The statue collapsed, head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of clay. And the fragments were blown away by the wind like chaff. You, O king, are the gold head of the statue, representing the greatest kingdom the world has ever known. The other parts of the statue represent lesser kingdoms that will follow yours. But they will not be as strong as yours. For you, O king, represent a kingdom that is strong and powerful, crushing all that oppose it. The legs of iron represent a kingdom that will crush and dominate all others. The toes of iron and clay represent a kingdom that will be partly strong and partly weak. Just as the toes are a mixture of iron and clay, so this kingdom will be a mixture of strong and weak elements. But just as iron and clay do not mix, so these elements will not combine. During the reigns of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will crush all the previous kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will last forever." The king bowed to Daniel and said, "Truly, your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." The king promoted Daniel to a high position and showered him with gifts. He made Daniel ruler of the entire province of Babylon, as well as chief over all the wise men of Babylon. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be administrators of the province of Babylon, while Daniel served at the king's court. Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 to 30. King Nebuchadnezzar built a huge statue of gold, 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and had it erected in the plain of Dura. He then sent out messengers to all the officials of his kingdom. When the people had all assembled before the statue, a herald shouted out this proclamation: "People of all nations and languages, listen. When you hear the music, you are commanded to fall down and worship this statue of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has made. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a fiery furnace." So as soon as all the people heard the music, they fell down and worshipped the statue of gold. But some of the officials noticed that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom the king had promoted, refused to worship the statue. They brought the 3 men to the king, who said to them, "Is it true that you refuse to worship the statue of gold?" "I will give you one more chance," the king said. "If you bow down and worship the statue when you hear the music, all will be well. But if you refuse to worship it, you will be thrown into a fiery furnace. And who is that God who can save you?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "Your Majesty, we have no need to defend ourselves. Our God is able to save us from the fiery furnace, and he will rescue us from your clutches. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the statue of gold you have made." Nebuchadnezzar's face became red with anger at them. He commanded that the furnace be heated to 7 times its normal temperature. The men who had arrested Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were killed by the blazing flames. The three men were bound and thrown into the furnace. The flames were so hot that they killed the soldiers who had thrown Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar, his face red with rage, glared at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than before. He then ordered some of his strongest soldiers to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the fiery furnace. The furnace was so hot that the flames killed the soldiers as they threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into it. The three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and asked his men, "Didn't we throw 3 men into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty," they replied, "but I see 4 men, untied and unharmed, walking around in the fire, and the 4th man looks like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar went as close as he could to the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. The king's men saw that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were unharmed. The fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothes were not burned. They didn't even smell like smoke. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to help them, and he saved them because they trusted him and obeyed him. They refused to obey my orders and would not worship their own gods or idols. I hereby decree that anyone who speaks against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be chopped into pieces and their houses torn down. For there is no other God who can save like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to high positions in the province of Babylon.